And today I have the privilege of talking about how victimhood has been killing the American dream. So in his book, The Epic of America, James Trustell Adams coins the term American dream as a government that allows equal opportunity for all of its constituents, regardless of socioeconomic status, making the pursuit of happiness possible for all. And the only reason why it's called the American dream is because America was founded on the premise of equal opportunity for all, ensuring that no one is stuck in the lower classes forever. So let's look at the chart here and see how the American dream is held up. On the y-axis, you have from 0 to 100, the percent of people earning more than their parents. And on the x-axis, you have the parents' income percentile. So, looking at the 1940s, over 90% of people were expected to out-earn their parents, and decade after decade, the chances for a 30-year-old to do better than their parents when they were 30 has declined to about 45% by 1980. So what happened? What has caused a steep decline? Well, I attribute this to three main things. First is the culture, then government policy, and also a decline in the family structure. All these things will be covered today in explaining how this is all culminated to this culture of victimhood, in instilling these values of victim mentality into the hearts of the American people. So let's define victimhood. Victimhood is essentially when any given person believes that their circumstances and background determine who they are and who they are destined to become. So therefore, by analyzing the values that have worked, it should become clear what sort of culture works and doesn't work for the American dream. So, defining culture, it is simply a group of people with shared values, okay? The values are especially important for America because the country runs or fails depending on the success of the people. So if the values have strayed too far in American citizens, then the further the American dream goes down on the decline. And for decades now, specifically for Asians, they have remained at the top of the economic ladder. Time and time again, they have achieved the American dream despite the fact that they are an ethnic minority. So how are they doing it? As Thomas Sowell said, Asian Americans have maintained tight families, highly disciplined work ethics, they've stressed education, and they've pushed their children to be better than themselves. And it is worth noting that these values are not purely for Asian minorities. These are classic American traditional values. So these values have been key. So are they harboring some sort of secret to success, or are people just not getting the secret? Well, Thomas Sowell says that the biggest secret is that there are no secrets, unless work is a secret. Work seems to be the only four-letter word that cannot be used in public today. Aside from work and discipline, the very successful people from minority children have had little in common with one another, and even less in common with the fashionable educational theories of our times. So, of course, education does truly matter, but education is only as useful as the person is as much as the person is willing to put into the education. So this is exactly why Thomas Sowell says that the test scores are highly correlative with how well the person will do later in life, because how hard the person works in one arena, like education, will also show how hard they work in other arenas, such as moving up the economic ladder. So, has America tried to maintain such values? Well, we'll see here in the government policies such as the welfare state instituted by Lyndon B. Johnson. He instituted it on a very benevolent premise. His policies in the founding of the Great Society, which were a series of government programs and policies, they were all in response to his declared war on poverty. Now, one of the greatest unintended consequences, as represented in this chart, is that the government has become increasingly generous in handing out benefits to the American people. So from here you have 1983 to, let's say, 2012, it's come from about 30% of people receiving some sort of government benefits to almost half of all Americans receiving some sort of government handout. So, as people rely more and more on the government to pay for their finances, they also become more dependent rather than self-reliant. And by doing so, they damage the values that have been core to success in America. However, the biggest casualty from government's policies' unintended consequences is the destruction of the nuclear family. So, it's as Pope John the 23rd says, The family is the first essential cell of human society. America is experiencing an unprecedented crisis of fatherlessness, and the effects of such crisis are increasingly hurting future generations of America. So let's go over some specific impacts. For boys specifically, they are far much more likely to use drugs, far more likely to be violent or experience criminal behavior, far more likely to go to jail, and also far more likely to do worse in school and even drop out. The vast majority of people who drop out of school, boys specifically, are coming from fatherless homes. And as for the girls, they're much more likely to engage in early on sexual activity and have children out of wedlock. So all these things correlated together have also diminished the success of the American people. And altogether, they've also had increasing mental problems entering into adulthood. So going into background, and more specifically cultural background, fatherlessness has had huge impact on children when considering whether they are raised fatherless or not. And remember, I said that the Asian community and their culture altogether has allowed them to be the most lasting, successful group in America. And even here, there's further reason for that. So as of 2021, 20% of Asian households were single parent, whereas upwards of 70% of black households were single parent as well. So it's a clear correlation with the values that are instilled through fathers that allow them to be successful in later life. Not the fact that that Asians are inherently smarter than everyone else, or that black people are inherently dumber. Everyone is made equal in the image of God. So, for reference in this chart, in 1960, only 8% of American children were living with their single mom. And in 2012, and it's even higher now, a quarter of Americans are living with just their mother. This is according to the U.S. Census Bureau. So as the crisis of fatherlessness has increased over the decades, so too has upward economic mobility declined across America, such as the chart I showed earlier. So it comes as no surprise then that more adults have been raised up in a culture where they believe they are determined by their circumstances, as countless amounts of data information has proven that future life outcomes are worse, in tandem with fatherlessness. There is no other country in the world with a greater rate of fatherlessness than America, and the decline of the American dream statistics show this to be true. So who is to blame? Well, what the Bible says, specifically in Proverbs, is to look to the ant. Not because the ant is more special than any other creature, but just because of how it works. The ant doesn't have an overseer or ruler, but it has enough personal agency to succeed where it needs to, just as what the founding fathers intended, which is exactly why the first 3 words of the Constitution say, "We the people," meaning that if you want success through the pursuit of happiness, Americans have to stay true to the values that have worked, namely hard work. And Mama, from the book Hillbilly Elegy, her wisdom says, God only helps those who help themselves. So, to finish off, I would like to encourage you all. Please challenge yourself and recognize that you might not be able to control all of your circumstances, but you can certainly control how you handle those circumstances. And so, through both hope and self-governance, in this great land of opportunity, the American dream will live on. Thank you.